Hi, my name is Richard Dix, and this is How Did That Happen? A podcast where I look at everyday things or events and try to figure out how they came to be. Every week I will research one topic, and by the end of the episode, I hope to truly have the answer to the question, how did that happen? Hello, and welcome back to another episode of How Did That Happen? Last week we talked about GPS, and this week we are talking about Styrofoam. Where did it come from? Who made it? And why? I must mention first off that I am not a science person, and there are multiple science topics in here that I do my best to pronounce and conceptualize from a general perspective. Full disclosure, I was a C person in science all the way through college, so bear with me. I really hope that the Twitter scientist or any actual scientist don't at me. If you do, please be gentle. But either way, it should be a good episode. Come along for the ride as I try to answer the question, Styrofoam, how did that happen? In 1839, a German scientist named Edward Simon accidentally created polystyrene. He did this by distilling some resin from the bark of an oriental sweet gum tree. He let it sit out for a few days and then found that it had thickened into a gel-type substance that he called styrol oxide. As stated, he didn't know what he had made. It wouldn't be until 1922 when Hermann Staudinger did more research on Simon's findings and discovered that the styrol oxide consisted of a long chain of styrene molecules. He called these molecules chains polymers. Basically, two or more monomers come together to make a polymer, and depending on the process, such as the one we're talking about, pressure and heat may be necessary. Staudinger is considered the father of polymers and later won a Nobel Peace Prize for his work in macromolecular chemistry. But at this point, in 1922, we still don't have styrofoam yet. But we only have where styrofoam comes from. To put it in human terms, we have styrofoam's dad. The mother could be anybody, or specifically any liquid or gas that's soluble with styrene. This is what's patented by another scientist. Enter our friend Carl Munters, who was born on March 22nd, 1897 in Data Jams, Sweden, which is a super cool name to say where you're from, like where you from, Data Jams. He filed his first patent in 1918, which was a crank for combustion engines that did not kick back, because evidently all the ones before that did. By the time he graduated from the Royal Institute of Technology in 1922, he had a patent for household refrigeration that used ammonia to cool the actual refrigeration unit, and products are still being sold on the market using that technology today. I'm telling you all this to say the guy is legit when it comes to inventions. Munters, in collaboration with John Tandberg, patented the idea for what they called plastic foam in 1932. I read through it, and he literally lists the same process that Dow does on a YouTube video for creating styrofoam. It was pretty interesting. It's because I watched the video first, and then I read that, and I was like, that's exactly what they did. For those super nerds, I'll leave the link for their patent in the description. Like I said, the Dow company found this information very interesting. In 1941, the Dow Chemical Company creates Styrofoam in Midland, Texas. The main scientist behind the project is Ray McIntyre. He is trying to make polystyrene flexible enough to coat radar and radio cables. He used the combination of styrene and isobutane, aka the mother, to bring it back full circle in a reactor under high pressure while applying heat, and this resulted in bits of polystyrene foam being extruded in the process. And this is probably a good time to mention that the true name of styrofoam is styrofoam extruded polystyrene, because technically the process that brings styrofoam out. You know, basically it's the combination of those products with the heat and the pressure that actually extrude the styrofoam. It was trademarked as Styrofoam in 1946 by the Dow Chemical Company. It's 98% air and consists of a closed cell structure, which makes it stronger. The first use for this product was on life rafts for the Coast Guard. They were also used for the life jackets as well, which is interesting to think about if you've ever watched those World War II movies. I've seen a bunch of those, and they always have those chunky life jackets on, and I've always wondered what was in there, and now we know, or now I know, that it was styrofoam, very, very early versions of styrofoam. It is important to note that the styrofoam we normally think of is not what our cups and takeout boxes come in. That's right. This is where I tell you a conspiracy theory and relate this all back to the eye on the back of a dollar bill. Not quite, but it's actually called polystyrene, and the makers of actual styrofoam don't like that it gets confused, but I feel like they lost that battle. Real styrofoam is for more industrial uses, such as home insulation, surfboards, and food packaging. The rights to styrofoam are now owned by DuPont due to a merger between the two companies about 5 years ago. And that is how styrofoam happened. And now it's time for the roundup. This is a new segment I am introducing where I will summarize the entire question of how did that happen for this episode in 30 seconds or less. A man in the early 1800s distilled some tree sap for days only to find it turn into a gel-like substance. 80 years after that, a man used that idea to describe the molecular makeup of that gel-like substance. And then 15 years after that, 2 more men actually patented that science. But who makes the money off of it? The Dow Chemical Company, who has now merged with DuPont. Key takeaways: there are no styrofoam cups. Things I didn't know before. Before this episode, there was not much that I knew about styrofoam, so technically the whole episode is things that I really didn't know before. But for me, the biggest thing was that styrofoam cups are not actually made of styrofoam. They're made of polystyrene. I mean, I'm sure somebody's probably told me that before, but now it's going to sink in, because I've done the research. This will make me look at takeout containers at least a little bit differently. It's still all bad for the environment, but before this I would have assumed that the same styrofoam that's used for commercial grade insulation was the same that's also in my fridge. We now know that to just not be the case. Another fact to note is that just like GPS, styrofoam's first use was for the military. This is only episode 6, but I wonder if a pattern is starting to develop. Check out those videos of styrofoam being made. I'll probably post one on Twitter. They are pretty wild just to watch it and just expand. Okay, that's been another episode of How Did That Happen? I'm your host, Richard Dix. Thanks for listening. Be sure to like and subscribe if you're into that sort of thing. And tune in next week. Got another episode coming.